Welcome to our morning creative discussion, where we are just going to talk about this industry of ours and just share some thoughts and share some experiences with each other to enrich each other in this creative pursuits and in these creative industries that we are involved in.
LitFest Harare is an annual literature festival held in Harare, Zimbabwe.
It is a carnival, a celebration of literature and spoken word.
The presentations will be made by means of readings, performances, recitations, discussions, interviews, debates, and community outreach.
But to start with, because now we've turned it into a digital session, I think I will start with the digital guru himself, as you see, Mr. Mukundu, who is a musician and veteran artist from Zimbabwe. Has become somewhat of a digital guru. He has his own podcast that's running. He is very, very vibrant on social media. And I think he's really paving the way and showing artists what it means to utilize digital tools, not only to connect with audiences, but to showcase the creative sector and also promote your work. So, Mr. Mono, I want to start by asking you the importance, especially in these digital times, of utilizing social media, of utilizing digital spaces as an artist. Why and how?
I'm a musician, a music producer, and a session musician. For people like me who started music in the analog era, there were a lot of barriers to entry. You had to go through record labels to release your music, and you needed radio presenters for you to be heard on radio. You needed TV presenters for you to be on TV. For you to be out there, you had to go through gatekeepers. But the good thing with digital technology is you can be your own gatekeeper. You can create your own ways to be seen. So, like I mentioned, I'm a session musician. If you check around the world, session musicians are usually not known. There are those very popular and unpopular people who work behind the scenes. I'm featured on over 1,000 albums, and a lot of people didn't even know that I participated on the number of songs that I participated on. So through social media, it was not my time to show off. I did a number of podcasts where I was demonstrating some of the songs that I featured on, some of the most popular songs. And people were surprised to discover that they've been dancing to my guitar lines for the past 3 decades, and they didn't know that it was me. So answering your question, social media helps people like me who used to be hidden, be seen by everybody. Now it's now easy for us to market ourselves and get some of the benefits that used to be for the lead vocalists only.
Yeah, I guess my follow-up question would be, the why is, like you said, it broadens your audience and it gives you the power to promote yourself. But some might find the space saturated. There's a lot of content online. There are a lot of people posting. How do you get attention towards yourself? How do you establish a viable or a vibrant presence on social media in spite of all the noise and all the content that's being created?
Yeah, that's a good question. They are now calling it interest media. They are no longer calling it social media because originally social media was just meant to connect you with everybody, people that you know already. But these days, social media is connecting you with people who like what you do. So if you're a footballer and you start posting content about football, everybody around the world who is interested in football will get to see your content. So answering your question, one way to be noticed in this maze of so many people posting is to stick to one genre. When I first got on social media, I would post about anything. I'll post about price hikes, I'll post about road rage, about religion, and argue with everybody. But I think since COVID, that's when I decided that I want my social media presence to be simply about music only. Since I started posting just about music, making sure that my page has a genre, it started growing. So I think one way to be noticed is to avoid having a page that posts about everything, having a single genre. If your genre is about cooking, you just post about cooking. If your genre is about sport, just post about sport. And like I mentioned earlier, it's now interest media, and everybody will love the type of stuff that you post will be sent to your page by the algorithms.
Interest media, not social media. That's a nugget. I just heard that today.
Yeah, things are changing every day.
Yeah, and it's interesting. What you're saying is, instead of being a generalist on social media, you should niche and focus on your specific niche. Let me bring in Chiedza. Your niche is children and children's writings. Where do you meet your audiences as a children's author?
This is not really my area. I feel I am quite bad at using Instagram, actually. So I'm very inspired by what you're saying. My way of connecting with the audience is actually being out in kindergartens, in schools, doing author visits, meeting parents, librarians, teachers, because they are the ones buying the books. It's not the children, obviously, so I need to get to know the adults. Yeah, it's very difficult. It's very difficult to grow on Instagram, and the publishing houses in Sweden are more and more counting that in when they take on a new book. How many followers do you have on Instagram? So you need to be there, definitely, and I need to work much more on that. Yeah.
I can bring in Mutoni, who is also focusing on the children's space from Kenya. Are you finding the same thing? Is it difficult to connect with your audiences? Do you need to marry the digital with Chiedza's approach of actually physically meeting your audience still? Or do you find maybe digital now offers more than the traditional way of doing things?
Actually, when it comes to children in Kenya, connectivity is an issue, especially for the children that I personally focus on, who are the younger children. Although they do have access through their parents' phone, the bulk majority don't have either enough credit or enough whatever to do, reading on the phone. So, but in terms of creating awareness, as a company, we use a lot of social media. But I have to say, I'm like you, on a personal level, I'm not much into social media. One of the things that we are experimenting around is putting QR codes into books, where we record, say, the music to a children's book. So like, this is a musical book. It's actually been staged as a musical. So what we did is put the QR code, so that if a parent wants to tell the story to the child in an exciting way, and a lot of parents are shy about that, we say, just instead of, if you can't make it, then just let the child listen to it. So we've recorded very many stories in audio and share that. And we're about to start experimenting with like graphic novels, other forms that are more contemporary, to try and, to appeal to the young people and kind of meet them, where they are.
I'm finding QR codes, especially this year, have become more of a thing. I'm seeing them on event posters.
Even on cars.
On cars, which was never the case, at least not... It's more of a recent trend, and I'm seeing, especially in Africa, I mean, QR codes have been around for a while, but it seems now they're gathering momentum, and maybe that's an additional avenue of making our content accessible. Let me bring in our brother from Lesotho, Mr. Nsie. When we talk about connecting with audiences, especially from the literature perspective, one of the issues that arises is people aren't reading. There's this global concern with the reading culture. And he had an interesting avenue he was telling me about establishing book clubs, which you also echoed that you were doing in Kenya. Talk to us about the book club and how that's an entry point into bringing the younger generation in, bringing them into the arts and into literature.
Thank you. Like he mentioned, and I would like to think that we are all aware that the culture of reading is a bit of a problem in our different communities, and it is scary mainly because I remember this saying that a writer who does not read is a threat to the nation. So it says if we have or are raising children who are not that much into reading, then in future, even writing itself will decline in terms of quality and authenticity. Therefore, these clubs, when formed, they basically, one, allow children to be able to express how they feel. And we give them platform that in as much as you are afraid to talk to anyone, but talking to a paper gets to be much more easier. Then through the clubs, there is a lot of inspiration. And as much as we are seeing the culture of reading is declining, but when they come together as young ones, they are able to express themselves fully. And within them, there is always that one particular one who still loves reading and is able to express themselves through writing. And now, since it's the environment that allows them to relax and be themselves, it is easy for them to gain knowledge amongst each other. And we as elders are able to chip in guiding them and finding ways to inspire them to get more into this culture of reading. In my club that I formed with the students back in Lesotho, we normally have plans that you take this book, and the expectation is that when we meet on a Saturday, you are able to give us a summary or at least a review of the entire book. And there is always a prize for them when they have mastered that. So that keeps them always to be willing to fully read the book so that they can provide a full detailed review, which in the end, of course, there's a prize. Everybody loves prizes. So that keeps them to always want to read all the time.
I think your first quote was very interesting. You said a writer who doesn't write.
A writer who does not read is a threat to the
I
nation.
mean, a writer who does not read is a threat.
Yes.
That's a very interesting quote.
Because what we write basically has all been written, but we just come up with creative ways to make it more different and engaging. So if you do not read, then there's nothing we can write.
Interesting.
I was happy to hear you echoing the same thing, that you've got over 80 book clubs in schools. Yes.
Yeah.
Because here in Zim, there are none. So then I thought that's a very interesting avenue, something replicable, where you can start book clubs. And even if the audiences start off small, you can then build on and leverage that. Let me bring in our sister from Bots. Give us a state of the nation of Botswana.
Your
The
Excellency.
state of the creative nation in Botswana. How is the environment there? How are you finding the work that you're doing? How are you finding the reception of the work that you're doing in Bots?
Thank you very much. Dr. In Botswana, the creative space is really coming up. I think there's a lot more published books compared to before. When I came into the poetry space, it was more just out of interest because the spoken word movement was like really getting traction, and that interested me. But we didn't see many people actually moving on to publishing that work. And now that is the case. Like we have, I think even today there is like authors awards evening, which is something that I can't say. I think it's new. It's like 5 years ago that was not there. So it's coming up really well. I came into poetry, of course, through stage, and I only later got into writing and putting the poems down. And that was because I was influenced by someone who just told me, you need to sit down with your work. Or maybe this was because I just wanted the stage. I felt like there's something that someone on stage is doing. There's a connection that they have with other people. I want to be able to do that, but I didn't have the guidance to like sit down with the words themselves and distill it to something that somebody can just like take and be able to read for themselves. So I had to also learn how to be okay with my poetry moving without me, without my body, without my articulation and all of that. And trusting that it will hold its own. And I see a lot of young people in Botswana doing that. So I would say it's really coming up, it's growing. The other thing creatively in Botswana, I think things like poetry work better as events, work better with like collaboration with music and all of that. I think it's coming up well. It could do better. It could be better. Yes.
It could be better, I think, is an echo. Let me bring in our sister Lena. Last year we had your publisher, Christian Carlson, as part of the festival. And he mentioned the fact that he feels a lot of times when he publishes, because he's got his little publishing house, he's going against the wind. And it's a tough exercise of passion. And sometimes he feels like the market doesn't appreciate how much effort goes into the creation of what's being shared. How do you navigate that? The creation of the art, and then also connecting with the audiences and hoping the audience appreciates and accepts what's been created, in your experience?
Yeah, I think that's a big challenge, and I have often been upset in Sweden because of the efforts that his publishing house is doing. Like, for example, he's an excellent translator as well, and a poet himself. But he has also translated a lot of international poetry and a lot of exile writers that are in Sweden. And I think it's a shame that it's not appreciated more than it is. But I guess it's also connected to marketing, the digital space. And if you work towards the stream, you're a single publisher, you can't do everything yourself. There are not enough funds to hire someone to do it. So yeah, it's hard. But I think there are, I know you still have to find those spaces and maybe create them. Create them with networks like PEN, for example. So I'm part of PEN, and then you can raise some space for those voices that he has translated, but that are not recognized in the big field of what's translated. I don't know if I could answer your question really, but I'm very happy about the small publishing houses, because like a project like this one, translation of 10 writers from different countries in Africa that we did together, me and Christian. Yeah. I think you have to take the initiative from the start, and you have to work with someone that believes in you. So I think the small publishing houses are more often open to new and creative ideas like that, which is wonderful. And their importance is big. They have to. I will do everything to support them.
I think before my viewing of this, it would be interesting to hear your view of this, that before a good book could always find its way itself, you would just trust it and it would find its way, but it's not like that anymore. And I don't know what has happened. I'm not the person to answer that, but I feel with the so good quality of these books coming out from these smaller publishing houses, for example, but they don't find the way. It's like throwing a book out into the sea. And I think it's the same problem with what you described, that you need to niche your book. It really has to be very clear what this book is about for it to go out in the world. Because in one line, like, what is this book? What does it want to say, basically? But what I did was, as I write for kids and youths, I started asking teachers in a school, what books do you need? What books are easy to work with? And they said short stories. Like, you can work with one short story during one lesson in a school. 1 hour, we work with one, we read it, we talk about it. So I wrote a collection for short stories for high school, and it's my most sold youth book. and is being reprinted all the time. So that's also a way to reach your audience to see what is actually needed, and combine that, of course, with what is your inner fire and what do I want to write about. But combine those two things.
It's interesting because touching back on the digital, there seems to be a migration towards short form content, shorter videos online on the social interest media platforms are becoming more popular than longer form content. And it's echoing what you're saying, that the short stories are something that can be consumed quickly and then discussed quickly. Like TikTok is doing better than, so I guess you can come in.
When I was young, right, there was only one path to be an author, where you had to get a publisher. So when you're thinking of people like Tsitsi Dangaremba, right, she talked about how she struggled to get her book published. So I actually think that it's now easier in terms of when I wrote my book, I self-published it myself. He edited for me. I'm in like feminist groups, and it's like very feminist books called At What Age Does My Body Belong to Me? And I was like, hey guys, could you please read this for me, review it, if there's anything I need to change and all of that. So it was almost like crowdsourced, literally from people I met on the internet. A lot of them were in different countries, which ended up doing like a companion book with that, which brought together like 10 people from those different countries, also sharing their own stories. And I don't think like that was not possible in a world where I had to go to an agent, and then I had to have a publisher. And my book ended up like going to Portland State University. I've never been to the US, right? And it was studied there, all because of social media and the internet. And to speak on like what he was talking about, where before you almost were caged in by what was possible. Like if you were an unknown person, you kind of were unknown. If there were no opportunities for you, especially like I was raised here in Zimbabwe, no matter what you're capable of, like it was hard to like get out there. Whereas now with social media, most platforms are actually optimizing for sharing. I'm a very big nerd. So like most of them are optimizing for what's being shared, what's being saved. That's why YouTube is introducing messaging on the platform so that people can message each other, right? They've started to find out like what goes viral isn't necessarily just like what are people clicking on. It's what gets sent to their friends in inboxes. Even when you start looking at like in the business world, the ads that perform best are actually ads that get shared in Slack groups, in business WhatsApp groups, in stuff like that, right? So people are interested in learning from people whose untold stories and like stories. I think that's why like yours is also interesting, where you're like, oh, I didn't know this person was doing all of this work, and I didn't know like there were these talents and all of this. And we all kind of consume different social media as well. Like my algorithm is so different from his, and we live in the same house. But I think that's opportunity for creators that just didn't exist years ago, where everything was more traditional. Like there was a path, whereas now there is no path. There is only what you create for yourself. Exactly. There's no gatekeepers. And I think that's really cool.
And I was going to throw the question to Sitawa about what's changed when you started, you entered the field, and the way things were done then and the way things are being done now. And is the change a positive thing, or do you feel that there's regression in the change that's happening to the creative sector and to new entrants in the creative sector?
When I started, which was in 2000, March 2007, the dictator Moi had been gone since 2002, December. So 2003, we have a new government, and there is literally a bursting forth of creativity and the arts, and people in all fields, people daring to write and write in a very different way from the traditional way of writing that was very safe, innocuous. Other than certain stars like Ngugi wa Thiong'o, who then got into trouble because of the way he writes. So there's this bursting of creativity. And, it's a time of Kwani and Binyavanga, and who is daring us and telling us, write what you want to write. Don't write this way, and so I joined the bandwagon. And it was also a time of incredible support, incredible support network. There were lots and lots of events going on, and then it was also there was a lot of innocence also. So we're all daring to do things and praising ourselves and each other. Kenyan writers are winning the Kane Prize or becoming runner. Muthoni here was one of the shortlisted Kane Prize winners, and so there's this incredible environment. And the Story Moja Festival, she starts a festival that is bringing 100, like 150 events, bringing all sorts of, I know people, I met people that I can't even believe I met. I've later on met them in other places, and they're like, yeah, but I met you in Nairobi at the festival, and I'm like, oh my goodness, but you're a great star, So this incredible environment that was created, and created a lot of writers, a lot of new creatives. And time has gone on. Many of them, Binyavanga passed away in 2019. A lot of people, either have stopped or there's been a fragmentation. Yeah, there's been a fragmentation. It's not as supportive as it used to be. However, there's also an incredible growth. So, many things can exist at the same time. That's one of the things I've learned in life. So there's an incredible growth, incredible new poets, for example, new young poets, new young women poets. A couple of weeks ago, I was on a panel, and with extraordinary young women poets that I'd never heard of before. And one of the things that was not so good in the past was that a lot of the poetry that was being created and performed was very, very Eurocentric. And now the poetry that I heard a couple of weeks ago is so Kenyan, so African, so, using, because one of the things that I've been doing, because of course, we're all educated in the British system. So, Wordsworth and, Shakespeare, etc. And so there's a way in which, you're creating to fit that kind of poetry, iambic pentameter and all those techniques. And one of the things that I've been doing as I continued with my journey is to free myself from that and go back to an African way of writing, of performing, of the freedom that I've been looking for, and I'm seeing it in the younger poets who are now, some of them are becoming credible references for me in my work. So it's a back and forth. So one of the things that I know is that this work and the work that I did that is so centered and centers, Kenya and Africa at that time broke the mold, but freed them. And then they then come and free me even more. So it's an amazing, communication across generations. Yeah. So I think that what I can say is that the door was opened. The sector has continues and is morphing in different ways. Some of us, the older ones, are still there. Because it's my job. Nobody asked me to be a poet. Nobody asked me to be a creative. And so, if I'm going to continue, I've got to find ways to continue to be inspired. And for me, because of my curiosity, I'm a poet, and then I learned how to write plays, and then I've written a musical, and I do all sorts of things, and that's my job for myself, not for anybody else. And then also you start seeing the impact you're making, and people coming up to you and saying, you did this for me when I saw you in 2012. I realized X, Y, and Z, and I was inspired. I'm freer now. And then that's one of the things that I use to keep going. But it's become a very rich area.
I like what you said about things can coexist. There can be negatives and positives to growth and development and the shifts in the space and in an industry, and both can coexist. It doesn't necessarily have to be one thing or the other. And it's about adapting to the environment as it adapts. And the global environment has really shifted towards, or is shifting towards AI. I know we had a session, I think the day before yesterday, about AI in art, AI in the creative space. And we were scratching the surface on that. Mandy is really working in that space. And there's a lot of confusion and fear around what it means for the creative sector, because it seems like the creative sector is at the front line of what AI is capable of doing. And people are wondering, what does this mean for me? Am I meant to incorporate it into my workflow, or is it a competitor to me? What's your take? What is AI in the creative sector? How are we relating, and where are we going?
I think AI is interesting in that both are true. It is our competitor, and it's something we should incorporate into our workflow. But what's very interesting about AI is almost that creatives, writers especially, created AI. And I'll explain in that AI was first coined in 1956, right? And then it actually became a serious field of research in 1979, if I'm not mistaken. So this has been like decades in the creation. This is why so many movies from the 90s, early 2000s would always talk about AI. And what you will see in terms of, even if you hear people like Elon Musk and Sam Altman talk about what inspired them, why they're creating certain things, a lot of it is fiction has merged with reality, right? So they actually sometimes see something in a movie, in a book, and then they create it. And it's, I think, part of one thing I would say for creatives right now is we are actually responsible for shaping what AI will become in 20 to 50 years. So what the media does is it usually takes all of the negative stories, right? Those are what get reported. AI is replacing people, jobs are being lost. But in how AI works, like on a very, very technical level, right? It doesn't think, it pattern recognizes. So you can teach AI to recognize a cat, for example, and then it can draw a cat. You can teach it to recognize Shakespeare, or recognize a type of like film genre or a director and the work that they do, and it can sort of like duplicate that. But it can't really create something from nothing or come up with something new the way creatives do. And I think our job now as creators, and there's some people who are already doing that, is to start imagining what a positive world with AI will look like. So I know a lot of people are always talking about jobs, but let's be real, like capitalism isn't working. No one wants to be working. People are starved. It only works for the very, very rich. And they want a world in which AI comes in and then it's commercialized, right? That's what's happening with ChatGPT, because before this, AI has existed. It was integrated into Gmail, into Instagram, social media. That's how a lot of like algorithms were working already. But then the commercialization of it, where it's now like anyone has access, anyone can create with it, is what has like created the most fear. But I think it's now our job to start and sit and say, what is the ways, especially in Africa, that we make sure that in the future of AI, it works for us and not against us? And it comes into things like you were talking about language. There are a few people already creating data sets that actually include African languages so that it can understand it. ChatGPT can speak in Shona if you ever want to try, but the accent is like Quran. It's bad. But things like that are important because unfortunately, I don't think AI is neither good or bad. Technology is neutral. right? But it does inherent biases. So, for example, it studied that data sets that said women get paid less than men. And when it suggests, if you are a woman and you come and say, hi, what should I negotiate for my salary? It's going to tell you a salary that's based on data that's lower than what it will tell a man. So there was a research study done, and on average, it will tell women to ask for a salary that's $70,000 less. Right. So it's inherited that bias purely from data. Same thing when you're looking at it suggesting should Black people be given a mortgage or locations and all of this. It's inherited our biases in data, which means our job, I think, especially as creatives, is how do we create new data? It's also learning from books. And I think we did a job, especially as Africans, where we wrote a lot about our oppression. We wrote a lot about the things that happened to us. And I think now is the age and time of us writing our future. What should our future with AI look like? What does it look like when it's solved disease or politics or climate change and all of this? Because these are all realistic things that with the tech that's possible, it can do, but it's not being applied to Africa, right? But our resources are in a very big way. We are fueling AI. We are creating the chips, the chips they literally need to create them. They come from resources from the continent. So I think it's a time for us to start to think beyond our resources being depleted to create this thing. What does the future look like for us in a positive way? Instead of only looking at the negatives, the fear of loss, let's think, okay, if we lose our jobs, if capitalism ends, as it should, what's the new system? What does that look like? What does equity look like? If we're doing UBI in Africa, because it's being discussed elsewhere, how does it work on the African continent? What is our job? What would it look like when we actually can be creative and influence this AI that's only working because it works with data, right? How do we make it work for us instead of against us? And I think that's how we succeed, by starting to think about our ideal future as opposed to just what are we losing right now, which I think a lot of us are kind of fixated on.
It's a very interesting point. Thinking of the future, imagining the future. I guess in a way, like you're saying, we want the status quo to remain the status quo, but flux is reality. And it's changing. And are we involved in it, or are we going to watch it happen to us? I think at this point, I'll just open it to the floor. We've had a gumbo of opinions and experiences. So if anything, you want to comment on something or you have a question, I think this is the time for the next 10 minutes before we conclude the conversation.
I just wanted to talk about something that was discussed earlier, which was attention spans. Mandy already touched on it a little bit. My name is Zen, by the way. I'm a filmmaker. And the issue of video and attention spans is very close to my heart. So what we've been finding is that attention spans aren't necessarily shrinking the way that we thought they were. There's quite a possibility that they're actually expanding. And especially with, as you called it, interest media. Young people, Gen Z, Gen Alpha, are willing to watch up to 30-day streams of their favorite creators. They'll sit there for like 4 hours a day, just staring at a screen without any issue. But the thing that sustains their interaction is interaction, right? They get to type in a chat and then the creator responds. So they feel like they have an attachment, like a proper back and forth with the person that they're interacting with. And I think for us, whether you are a writer, a filmmaker, a musician, that then puts the onus on us to create opportunities using interest media, as you expanded on, to interact with our audiences, because that's how we ultimately retain them, by making them feel like they are part of our process of creating whatever it is that we're creating. They start to feel like they have a responsibility to it. Books in the past, you mentioned that books used to find their way. And that's because of the way that we used to socialize, right? You needed something to talk about. You couldn't just look at your phone. So at some point in your conversation, you'd start talking about the thing you're reading. And now that other person wants to look at that thing, and so on and so forth. But now, because of interest media, our socialization skills are sort of starting to erode. But the one thing that we can do is share what we're looking at, share what is interesting to us. And also, me, myself, as the creator, I get to share myself with the people so that they might be interested in me and ultimately what I'm creating. So I found that very interesting, especially where it pertains to attention spans. It's a generational thing where we always go, oh, these kids, but I think those kids might be onto something that we need to tap into.
I was also going to add from what you talked about book clubs. So he wants to start film clubs. And I think there's also now an opportunity to marry books and film and video directly. So although people are like, oh, books are dying, right? There are these new form of, I don't even know like the names of the actual platforms, but they're platforms that will post short TikToks where it's like a story and it's like being read, and then you go and you pay to read the rest of the book or read the rest of the story. And then some of them are also interactive to what he was talking about, where you can also like determine how the story ends. So it's technically a book, but it's kind of like in a different format, in a different media that speaks to like what children are already doing on social media. And what I find interesting about like doing book clubs is now you're bringing the format to them. Like they don't have to go out and look for it, which is what people are used to, because like our media is like right there. You just swipe and you find what you want. And with what he wants to do is a lot of people now will hear about a movie first and they'll hear, oh, there's a book about it, and then they'll go watch it. So I think there's a big opportunity, especially coming back to AI, where you can literally create a little video of your book and visualize it, capture them. And then people are willing to read and get deeper into the story because now they're intrigued. Now I need to know how it finishes, right? Like I was once caught with such a stupid story. It wasn't even well written, but I was so curious. I actually went on the app to know like what happens next. And we did this for an author who is, she wanted to stay anonymous, but she wanted to publish her first debut book. So we actually created an AI avatar for her. And one of the things we're like, we can create a website for you. We can have a chatbot that has like the AI's name, so people can actually come and interact with the author, even though it's anonymous. So we feed it your information. What do you want it to know about and talk about and be? And people get to interact with it as her without people ever learning her name. We also created a cast for her book, right? And we generated it with AI, and then he put it into like a proper like video so that people can actually be captured with it visually. And now you're pulled into the story and we're like, okay, the book is coming out, go and like read the book. So I think those are also like interesting ways you can kind of like marry the technology that's coming out without losing the part you enjoy, which is the writing, right? Now, how do you market with the new tools?
I was just about to talk about almost the same thing, not as eloquently as you have, but like in our book clubs, one of the things we realized when we talked to teenagers, because our book clubs are for teenagers, is that they're very interested in bringing it to life beyond the book. And so what we did is, so we have this collection called Deception and Other Stories. And in it, we have some stories that are about social media. So catfishing, cyberbullying, online gambling. So basically did what you did, which is talk to teachers, talk to students, and find out what are the issues in social media that they're grappling with, students are. And then we formatted the book club so that it's as lively as possible. So we actually have a formal role called an agitator and a formal role called a do-gooder, who offer we start the book club with these very different, sort of clashing viewpoints. And then that gets everybody sort of immediately then wanting to join the discussion. So it makes it a social occasion as opposed to just, so we don't spend time sort of reviewing the book in the traditional sense. It's more about what did the book make you think about? Like, what are the insights you've gained from immersing yourself in this world, in this fictive world? And then what happened is we realized there was an opportunity to take it beyond, so taking on the challenge that was given to us. So we approached Meta, the Facebook people, and said, there's so many discussions coming out of these book clubs about social media, and the perception by students that if these big platforms aren't taking responsibility for what they're doing. So since we see online that you have an online safety campaign, why don't you, allow us to facilitate us to visit even more schools, and then have a competition where the children come up with their own social media codes. And so they come up with one for their school. And we just had the conclusion with the winning schools at the Nairobi International Book Fair in September. And it was extraordinary what the students were coming up with, because they took it beyond the stories that, that we had written. And as a result, Meta have actually now commissioned us to do stories across the Pan-African region, where different countries are talking about the issues, the social media issues that they're dealing with. So I just wanted to say that we have to think of books now, I think, in a different way. It's not just the written form. It's how can we present it in a way that's vibrant, that crosses the different formats. So we've done that, like for this children's book, Matatu from Watamu. So that's a stage play, but also has a competition because it's a conservation story about the sea and all the plastic that's in the sea, where we have little competitions in kindergartens and lower grades, talking about how can they keep their environment clean, etc. So using it as a starting point for a bigger conversation. And then I'm just going to conclude by just saying, I'm very interested in AI as a tool. And I often think we think of it as this big, I don't know, I don't even know, like this amorphous thing that's going to take over the world, and, then nobody will work, and, and we'll all be beggars, I don't know, homeless, stateless or whatever, and have to rely on social good or whatever. But I think of it in the same way that I remember when calculators, I'm old enough to remember when calculators came to be, and all the noise there was in the education system that now children won't know how to calculate. How will they do long division if they don't know, the steps, and the calculator's done all the steps, etc. And they banned calculators from exam rooms and what have you for years. I think it's only recently they've started allowing them in. And I think of AI in the same way, at least in terms of how we use it creatively. So I look at it as a tool and I say, it is not in command of me. I am in command of it. I will tell it what I need and it will help me in the way that I need. So I use it, for instance, because I work with a lot of writers to edit their work. And I say, when we're brainstorming the story, AI is incredibly useful. It's not as useful like when you're actually writing the story, but in terms of just brainstorming, like what are the possibilities? What are the different sort of endings you might have? Or how can I structure this so that it flows better? Or are there conflicts in here that I could include that really up the stakes, So for me with AI, it's just that you need to understand the fundamentals of your craft, right? In order to instruct it right. Because if you don't, then you're just relying on it to tell you what to do. And as you know, because Africans are not in those data sets, then honestly, it will tell you things that have no relevance to you. So don't use it. I say don't really use it to write, but use it especially for brainstorming. I experimented with using AI to create visuals, because I started painting 5 years ago. And I thought, I really struggled to get the kind of visual that I'm looking for children's stories. And we eventually did it, and this is the result. So I'm very keen that, somebody said, oh, this is a beautiful cover. Well, I created it with AI. But it's not like you go and brief it and say, give me this cover. It was a 3-week intensive, like, no, change that. No, this is my reference. No, feeding it, because I'm in charge. It's not it. It is my illustration, not an AI illustration. So I'm just saying, I think we as Africans need to experiment a lot more and not be intimidated by it.
In terms of books, right, the reading culture, I feel like the audience is changing for the books, right? Growing up, like, I went to a mission school, We weren't allowed TVs, radios, or everything. So the library was my source of entertainment, right? I had all the time in the world. I could sit in there. I could pick any book. I could go through it. I could distill it, right? Nowadays, with how the digital noise is all around me, right? You'll notice during a day, I really don't have that much time to read a book, right? I have to create time to read a book. And if I create that time, let's say it's an hour per day, right? And I have a book that's 250 pages long. The last thing I need is that book to have 5 points being wrapped in fluff, right? Because after a while, I'm going to read 3 chapters and realize you're talking about the same thing. That book is going to bore me, and I'm going to put it down and find the summary on Blinkist, right? Mm-hmm. And ask Blinkist, what is this book about? It's going to give me 5 points, and I'm not coming back to that book because I've distilled what you tried to tell me. Maybe it's really 5 points in 250 pages. Come on. Like, I don't have the time to really, unless if you give me 250 pages and it's really worth the 250 pages, I can put in the time for that book. So people have realized that I don't have to read the book. I don't have to read the whole book, right? I can just go online and be like, give me a summary of the 40 Laws of Power. And in 5 minutes, I can be able to have a conversation with somebody who spent 2 weeks reading it. And they won't be able to tell the difference, right? So the value of like actually sitting down with a book and reading, for most people, they don't see it anymore. Because what they want to learn, they can just learn, you know. So your writing, I feel, needs to go beyond the point, the main thing. Like, you know what, glasses are good for your eyes. And that's what you're trying to say. You know, there needs to be something that the reader can connect to on an emotional level. So like humanize your work, maybe. Let me say that. Right? Humanize your work so when I read it, I'm connecting to more than just the base idea of A, B, C, D, and E. Because that also differentiates your work from the next author or the next medium, right? Why am I reading a book about instead of a movie? I remember the Harry Potter series, you're a nerd, right? People who read the books had problems with the movies, right? Oh my God, they left out so much stuff and whatnot and whatnot and whatnot, right? And what was happening is 2 people from different mediums not being able to come in the middle and realize certain things that are portrayed in the book don't translate well to film, right? And explaining to the film guys that certain ideas cannot be expressed in film, but I can express them through writing, like thought, right? But we live in an age where I feel like there needs to be mixed media in stories, right? Yeah. I used to be a part of a WhatsApp, right? It's young guys who do music. They're mostly rappers. But we couldn't find time to meet each other. Right? So, you know, there's a battle culture in rapping, there's another rapper and whatever. So what people ended up doing is they ended up battling through WhatsApp. Yeah. We just meet at 7 p.m., everybody's on the chat, and it's Lena versus Dutch, you know, and Dutch would type up a verse and people would laugh and Dutch would type up a verse, you know. And eventually it evolved into something whereby somebody would write 4 lines and somebody would be like, oh, can I help you with that? And they'll write 4 lines and somebody else would write 4 lines. And it would take 2 hours to finish like something, but everybody would be engaged because there's a little bit of their DNA in the final piece. And I feel like if writers could do that, poets could do that, they'll sit down and they'll be like, okay, we have a big idea, right? You write this page, right? Read my page, then you finish the next page. You finish the next page. The writers would be engaged. The fans of each reader, of each author, would be engaged because there's so many different ideas, so many different styles. And trust me, I won't be bored if it's so many, you know, different perspectives coming along. So I feel like the industry and the way we approach the art itself needs to change because the consumer is changing.
The honorable member of the House has set me thinking in another direction. What's the point of writing and what's the point of reading? I think you read for information and you can go on the internet and get a summary of a book and you get the knowledge you want and you go. But then there's the reading for pleasure. The joy of listening to the words on the page in your head. How do we retain that? I mean, how do we keep our readers interested in enjoying the language, enjoying the story, and not just buying a book for the contents, but for the pleasure of it? I don't know, how can we go about it?
No, what I am always reminding myself of is, for me, the writing is a rebellious act. really. Like I started writing when I was 17, growing up in a very high, extreme racist countryside in Sweden. And the girls in the school were very abused by the boys. And I started writing about that and won a prize as a youth for these poems. So I learned to see the power it can give you if you try to put the words into this, but also really go into what is really burning inside you and using that frustration or anger and use your own tone, the tone you have in your heart, that everyone, like all of us have different tones, and it's really our thoughts, basically. So I feel that more and more writers are very, in this, what we're talking about here, I feel we're going to very egocentric authorships worldwide, where it's like me, your authors becoming more and more influencers. Like we've lost the mystics of an author. Like I don't want to know my favorite author's renovation kitchen. Like I don't want to see it. I don't want to see what tiles she's choosing. I want to have the mystics still. And the mystics I find reading her book, and where I can see that this, like, I must write this, like the anger, the frustration, like that I must find out what she's thinking. So like for me, that is my way of capturing someone, is really trying to be as honest and brutal as I can when I write, and really putting down everything that is I'm ashamed of, basically. And into this discussion, like when I feel very safe. People always ask me, how can you dare to write this? Oh, I would never dare to, like, aren't you like afraid of publishing this? But I feel very safe when it's between two covers like this. Like I can write anything about myself if it's published like this. But just posting a post, I would never do that. So I find it so difficult to do what you do, like to say something like that about myself in a post, even if it's written. So yeah.
Unfortunately, we have to wrap up because we have the next program coming up for the program of the day. We have a silent reading hour, where to encourage the reading culture, we have a silent reading hour in partnership with Silent Book Club. They meet every month and have the silent reading hour. You bring a book or whatever you're doing for an hour, read, indulge yourself, and then network after the fact. So that's what's coming up. And then we also have a book swap, where you bring a book and you can take a book. So the shelves over there in partnership with the Harare Book Club, also just to encourage people to broaden their stock of books. If you've read a book and you don't have anything to read anymore, you can come and leave the one you've read, get a new book. So that's what's coming up. But I want to thank you all for this conversation. It's been very enriching, and I've learned a lot. And I think we need to do more of this. This has triggered something in me, because I felt it's nice to learn from so many different perspectives, and and thank you so much for being open to having this conversation and sharing of your knowledge and sharing of your thoughts and ideas. So
I think you forgot to mention that over and above being online, Mona is also a writer and has published a number of books.
Yes.
So he's in both spaces.
He's a musician and he writes. And he's a podcaster. Yeah. And maybe that's the future now. We're all going to be multiple things. Wrapped into multiple things with AI. But yeah, thank you so much, guys. And thank you for this conversation.
Thank you so much.